Thank you. Paragraph 5.3 of the report says that in 2008, an 11-year-old girl came to the attention of the police after she disclosed that she and another child had been sexually abused by a group of adult males. Just a few weeks later, she was found in a derelict house with another child and a number of adult males. Yet she was arrested, 11 years of age, she was arrested for being drunk and disorderly, and none of the males were arrested. Has your force identified the police officers involved in that and found out what went on?
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know.
All right. In paragraph 5.21...
Sorry, will you find out?
We will. Apologies,
and come
yes.
and tell us next week. We can't have a don't know on these issues.
Correct. I will have an answer to that question next week.
Paragraph 5.21 shows how a police officer dismissed the case of a 12-year-old girl who'd been having sex with up to 5 Asian males because he said she had been, quote, 100% consensual in every incident. 12 years of age? I think that's unbelievable, to be honest. Have you identified who that officer was and found out what happened there?
Can I just make one thing clear? That I've said today that we must have an independent investigation team to come back at this. I have also personally spoken to the Director of Investigations at the IPCC.
Sorry, Mr. Austin, could the Chief Constable just finish? Please finish.
I've also personally spoken to the Director of Investigations at the IPCC, and in order to involve them in this as well.
Well, if people I was responsible for managing, if a report landed on my desk well over a week ago now, saying that people I was responsible for had behaved like that, I'd want to know pretty quickly what on earth had happened. In paragraph 5.9, it says that fathers had tracked down their daughters and tried to remove them from houses where they were being abused, only to find themselves arrested when police were called to the scene. Do you know what happened in that case?
Chair, I don't seek to defend any of this, and that I've asked for I'm in the process of setting up an independent investigation because the number of staff at Rotherham over such a period of time means that it can't have credibility unless we have some independence to the investigative process.
I know, but I don't think it's too much to expect that in cases like that, which have been the subject of huge publicity over the last few weeks, that the force could have identified what happened. The truth, I mean, this report sets out the industrial scale abuse of young girls in horrendous detail, and it shows that they were completely failed by the police in Rotherham. And I'd have thought that finding out what happened and finding out who's responsible for that failure ought to be a pretty big priority.
It is a big priority, and I am public on saying that it is a big priority, and have taken steps to start putting the wheels in motion to make it happen.
Why is it another police force that's going to be doing this investigation and not the IPCC?
Well, because there are, I think, 2 aspects that we need to look at here. One is straight criminality. Do we have people still out in the community who should have been properly investigated years ago and weren't? And that's more of a straight criminality issue. Yeah. I think the second issue, which is more in the territory of the IPCC, and this was a conversation I had only this morning with the Director of Investigations, is more about senior people who, what did they know, what did they do, and were there failings there. Now, certainly around the IPCC, that's more in their territory where police officers are concerned. I think, as far as the council are concerned, a criminal investigation would have to prove misfeasance, malfeasance, something like that.
But it's not just senior people, is it? I mean, one of your officers decided that a 12-year-old girl was having sex with up to 5 adults and was 100% consenting in every incident. Should somebody like that be working for the police? Someone's capable of making a decision like that.
No, it's a dreadful decision. No. And I've set my position out to find out about it.
I think that there's a feeling that just giving it to another police force is not necessarily the answer, given what we've just heard, your testimony in respect of the other matter. And perhaps the importance of an independent report, it should be conducted independently by the IPCC, would recognise the fact that if there's criminality, you'll need to have police officers involved. that can be taken on by the IPCC as well. And I think that's what Mr. Austin is getting at. The fact that some of these cases, including the case that he's just mentioned, I think is in our last report. And we will certainly want to know next week when you come in to give evidence on this again, that those officers, as Mr. Austin has said, have been properly disciplined for what they've done. Dr. Huppert, Nicola Blackwood and Michael Ellis. We have to close. We have other witnesses and we will return to this again.
Thank you. There are many questions which we will look at next week, and I think I would agree with the role for the IPCC. This has to be sorted out properly, and I hope you will take that further. Can I ask one very brief question? What would you say is the level of confidence that the community in Rotherham currently have in the police force?
I suppose it's difficult to say, but I suppose what I would absolutely have to concede in the circumstances is that that confidence is probably less than it was a week or two ago before the publication of the report. Absolutely. There's no doubt that a report like this is going to impact on community confidence. That's a matter of massive regret, but the point for somebody like me is that we have to take things forward here and try and put things right.
And so aside from the independent investigation and the IPCC involvement, what else will you do to try to rebuild that relationship?
There are already, as you will be aware, there are 15 recommendations in the report. We're looking at each of those, comparing where we are with our current practice against what's going on and the recommendations, and starting to make assessments about whether we, ourselves, or partners who we work closely with need to do more, whether we need to invest more, whether we need to change practices in order to address the serious issues which have been raised in the report.
And would you be able to give us that response in time for next week?
I will do my very best, sir.
We will want the response by next week, because the Parliament is going into recess. I'm not saying the whole world needs to stop because we're going into recess, but because this is in the public domain and you've known about these circumstances for a number of years, we would like all the answers by next Tuesday. Michael Ellis, and then, sorry, Nicola Blackwood and then Michael Ellis. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that sort of credit is due for the 104 convictions, which you mentioned earlier. That's a significant improvement on the last time that you appeared, when I think that you'd only had the 5 convictions.
Very low number, yes.
But I just wanted to follow up on some of the points made by Mr. Austin of the 2 fathers who were arrested, the victims who were arrested for petty offences, but also to go back through the history of some of the operations for child sexual exploitation which have occurred in South Yorkshire. Operation Central, which resulted in the 5 arrests, Operation Czar in 2009, abduction notices but no convictions, Operation Chard, again, abduction orders but 11 arrests and no convictions. And then the following operations. And I'm just wondering what efforts there have been to go back to those victims, identify them, and try and make sure that you are making amends as much as possible and giving them the support that they need, but also offering them a route through investigation and the criminal justice process if they are willing to do so. Because if there has been any call that has been the loudest throughout the sort of national outcry of this, it has been for prosecutions and justice. And if you are managing to get convictions at this stage, I think that going back to those victims and offering them the opportunity would be something I would hope that you would be doing.
And can I reassure you that a year ago we set up a historical child sexual exploitation team, which is going back through all of these issues that relate to Rotherham. And so the particular cases that you refer to fall within the remit of that team. So there are clearly many more, but the point I want to reassure you about is that part of their remit is to go back and identify where we may have failed victims and then look at where we can go with the investigative process.
Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. And finally, Michael Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Constable, have you discussed Professor Jay's report with your predecessor, Med Hughes, who was Chief Constable from 2004 to 2011, and therefore was Chief Constable during a large part of the operative period? Have you discussed it with him?
No.
Don't you think it would be a good idea for you to have made contact with him, to at least see what he has to say about these matters? You, as you pointed out, were not Chief Constable at the time. You don't think it's a good idea to make contact and find out some answers?
So we may do that. However, it may be that There is the requirement that he's spoken to in another way by an investigation, and that also has to be borne in mind.
How much blame should he shoulder? Because you don't obviously want to accept the shoulder of blame yourself, but how much blame do you think as Chief Constable during a large part of the operative period, and as someone who was, I believe, Deputy Chief Constable and Assistant Chief Constable in South Yorkshire before that, how much blame should he shoulder?
I think it's a difficult one because this might get investigated. I think it would rather depend on what was known at the time, which I think is the issue, isn't it?
Well, yes, but his priority was publicly known as speeding. He was obsessed with a war on the motorist while these horrific crimes were going on in Rotherham. So don't you think prima facie there is some responsibility for the ACPO rank police officers who were responsible in South Yorkshire during this operative period?
Clearly, there is responsibility at a senior level. It's impossible for me to say at this stage who knew what.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that we will be calling Meredith Hughes as well next week when we look at Rotherham again. I think. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Ellis. That's very sensible. Chief Constable, this committee has been shocked by events in Rotherham for the last 2 years. That's why I produced a report with 130 recommendations. Whereas in the Cliff Richard case, you could say, well, it's not me, it's the BBC or it's U-Tree. The responsibility does rest with South Yorkshire Police. I know we've had different chief constables, and you may not necessarily have been there for the last 10 years, but this is the police force, so it reflects on the credibility of the police force. And we are shocked by this, and we do hold South Yorkshire Police responsible for the failures that have occurred. Many lives lost as a result of a decision not to take action. I'm sure you saw the Panorama programme yesterday.
Yes.
I will be writing to the Home Secretary to ask for that research that was conducted. It seems that all this has been around. That's why I wonder whether another report is necessary. I know it's important to get those responsible, and we should get them responsible, those to be held to account. But at the end of the day, what the people of Rotherham need is action. People being prosecuted, convicted. That's what they want to see happen. And if you've had 12 new cases since last Wednesday, it's a real worry to this committee, because there must be many more who have not come forward to give evidence.
And Chair, if I might say so, it's my responsibility to move this on and get things right. I understand there are difficult times around at the moment. We do have to restore public confidence. We have achieved prosecutions. We will achieve more. We've got some very significant investigations in the offing. But it is my duty to take things forward. And irrespective of who's been Chief Constable in the past, I'm here now, and it's my job to take it on from here.
So you're committed, you're not considering leaving your post and leaving it to somebody else to deal with, given the history of South Yorkshire, given what's happened in recent weeks and the report by Professor J, you want to stay and complete the job, is that right?
Absolutely, and in fairness, Alexis J does point out that things have been much improved recently, and yes, I think we can continue to improve on that.
We will hear from her next week. Chief Constable, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Order, could we call Lord Tony Hall, the Director General of the BBC, James Harding, the Director of News, and Jonathan Munro, the Head of News Gathering.